Welcome to the Mission Advancement Podcast, where we talk about the importance of human connection, generosity, and leadership so that mission-minded leaders will be inspired to learn and grow. Today, we have a really special guest, Elisabeth. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. You are the founder of an incredible organization here in the Dallas area that we've had the opportunity to know for several years now. And so I want you to talk a little bit about the human impact, but also kind of your journey in founding an organization and what kind of led you to do that. So let's start there.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I am Elisabeth Jordan with the Human Impact. And before I jump into my journey, I just have to say that mission advancement changed my life because in 2020, my board told me that I needed to go to fundraising school, which tells you how many skills I had in fundraising at that time, and got connected with Lacey from your team. And she really helped reframe the way that you all see fundraising, which is that it also is relationships-based. And we have a relationships-focused ministry to people who are experiencing homelessness on the streets. And I was able to see that the same way we care for our brothers and sisters on the streets is the way that we're invited to care for donors. And so once I realized that our whole mission was integrated and that I could just treat the donor the same way I would treat the man or woman we were serving on the streets, it changed everything for me. And I was so terrified of fundraising before, and now I have so much joy. Like, I love sharing the story. I love inviting people to join us. And truly, it's one of the most impactful things that's happened in my journey as a founder and leader.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. This podcast is not about, what we do at Mission Advancement, but it's so inspiring and just, heartwarming to hear how it has impacted you as a leader, because that's exactly what we are trying to do, is to make fundraising a joyful experience, not scary, not transactional. And I know you guys have embraced it, and we could do a case study on how it's impacted your ministry. But
tell us, fundraising fun.
You make it fun. Well, there you go. There's lots of fun little ways we can, not fundraising, friend raising, right? There's lots of little sayings that we have in our industry. But let's go back to the human impact. So you and I are both founders. And one of the reasons I was excited to invite you to join us on the podcast is I do think there's some unique challenges, unique strengths, whatever that founders bring. And we're going to get to that in a minute. But just kind of share with people what inspired you to found a ministry. That's a huge step. What led you to that, and kind of what was happening, and what do you see as kind of the problem that you guys are solving?
So I was in the for-profit world for most of my 20s, and I went through some crises professionally and personally. And I had grown up in the Christian church, but in my 20s, I had a lot of doubts about my faith, and it had really left kind of my faith. But there's nothing like a crisis to drive you back to God. And so I went back to God and I said, hey, my plans for my life aren't working out, in case you can't tell. It's not going great. If you're real, then you made me. And if you created me, then you made me for a purpose. What is your purpose for me? And I told God that if he would show me what he created me for, what he had for me to do, that I would go wherever he asked me to do. I would follow wherever he sent me, which is, I realize, a bold prayer, but I think it's the prayer that leads to life. Because if God really did create each of us, he does have an intention for us. And I think it's the place we'll be most fulfilled. And my journey led me to the opposite side of Dallas that I was raised in. I was raised in the Park Cities, which is one of Dallas's most affluent neighborhoods.
Right.
You never have to leave, really, to have all your needs met. There's so much wealth of not just financial resources, but opportunity, love, people who believe in you and cheer you on. And I, on this journey, ended up getting invited to the south side of my city.
Yep. A little different over there, right? Yeah.
I mean, if you drive through it, it looks different. Like everything is different. And I had always thought that poverty only existed overseas, even though technically I could have told you that there was poverty in our city. And so it was really an awakening for me to realize, no, there are needs actually in Dallas, and there's something I can do about it. And there was a man named Larry James who, he invited me to a street corner between a bus stop and a homeless shelter. Okay. And he said, I'm going to meet my neighbors. Will you come join me? And then I learned by neighbors, he meant people who were homeless. And I was like, I said yes, but maybe I should walk that back, because going to be with people experiencing homelessness was very far out of my comfort zone.
Right.
probably like many of the listeners, I had a lot of stereotypes about people experiencing homelessness, that they were lazy, that they were mentally ill, that they were addicted, that their poor choices had gotten them into this situation. And so when I joined Larry that first day, I didn't have like the best sense of how it was going to go or what it was going to be like. But I noticed Larry doing something really unique that we've already touched on, which is that Larry just treated people like people. He knew people's names. He had conversations with them. As I would keep going week after week, he would bring a football out and throw the football with the guys. I would see women and men like ask him to sit down with them, and they would cry on his shoulder, and he'd pray over them. And I actually just saw him be a person alongside other people. And even though he wasn't teaching me verbally, he was showing me a new way of seeing those who are very vulnerable in our city, people who are experiencing homelessness.
Right.
And then I call my first 3 years on the streets my research and development years. I'm sure as a founder, you too went through a period of like, who am I exactly? Like, what am I doing? And a lot of those questions came up for me early on I quickly learned that because I wasn't raised in poverty and had never experienced homelessness, a lot of what I thought would help people were really projections. They were I pictured myself in their situation and thought, here's what I would need. But like one example is one day I organized a trash pickup on the streets. And I thought, well, if I were on the streets, I would want the trash picked up. I'm going to help them. They're going to love it. We did it. It was great. But then I came back a couple of days later and all the trash was still on the streets.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was kind of this moment of like, the value I placed on that is not the value that they have for that. And at first I was a little bit indignant about that. But then I had a friend volunteering with me at the time who said, have you ever asked people, what do you want? And I was like, nope, straight up never have asked people that. Like, just been doing what I think they would want. And so I went out that next week and said, like, if we were to organize another Saturday event, what do you want? Like, what would bless you? And overwhelmingly, people said haircuts. And so we ended up setting up our street side salon is what we called it.
Right.
Rented a generator. We're in an empty lot. Barbers and hairstylists gave their time. And it was so beautiful because as we did these and continued to do them over the years, the men and women who came would tell us like, oh, I felt confident enough to interview for a job after.
Wow.
Cut and shave.
Life-changing, right?
Reconnect with my family, like all of these things. And so what I learned is that if I could set my stereotypes aside, if I could put my projections down and pick up something that is so simple that I wish all people did more, which is to kind of put my phone away and to be present and to truly listen to someone else, to give them my full attention. I began to hear people's stories, and their stories actually had a theme. And I would hear about people who were raised in poverty. And when they told me their origin story of homelessness, it wasn't what I projected onto them, like that they had just made a terrible choice and it had sent them into a downward spiral. They actually told me about the loss of the most important person in their life. They either went through a divorce or the death of a family member. Sometimes it was their spouse. Sometimes it was an aging parent with whom they lived. Sometimes it was even their child. And it sent them kind of in a downward spiral. And then they end up on the streets. And because they've lived in poverty their whole lives, they don't have an economic safety net, but they also are now without their relational safety net. And as you know, we're held in society not just by our finances, but by our relationships.
Yes.
And I was hearing people express this deeply relational need to be seen and loved and believed in and walked alongside. And I was observing that in our current homeless care system, we really think in terms of economic support of people experiencing homelessness. And that's all good. It should be happening. We should have shelters and programs and services and like tons of honor to all the incredible people doing that work day in and day out. It's just that there was a gap in care because people also need to just be supported as a person. And so the mission of the Human Impact, which is friendship, essentially, we believe that friendship heals what housing alone cannot, was born to fill that gap in care.
Yeah. Whew, that's crazy. I love how you guys talk about, your friends on the street. And I know with our team, working with you guys, we've been there, we've built relationships there. I've heard really fun, inspiring stories about just times that we've been kind of on site with you and have had that same experience of just getting to know people just at the core of who they are. And I love that idea of just like, let's not assume we know what people need or want because it's what we like or want. Like, let's ask them and meet them where they are. And that goes right into my next question, which, one of the themes of our podcast is generosity. And financial generosity is critical, and we have worked with you guys in that area. We already mentioned that, but you guys have kind of your own definition of generosity. And I'd love for you to just share that with people and say a little bit about how that influences you as a leader and how it lives itself out in the human impact.
I've heard people say that like our time is the most finite resource we have. And so that's the most generous thing you could do. And I agree with that on some level, but I would go a step further and to say that really it's ourselves, that what we have to offer each other, that's the most sacred thing we have to offer each other is actually like just being fully present with another person. And we're in such a disconnected, distracted age, and it's a real problem. Like, it's really hard to not pick up your phone 100 times a day. You have to be really disciplined to choose to set it down, to look people in the eye. Like, I've taken email off my phone. We have to be very disciplined to do that. But I think the most impactful thing we can do is to put our distractions away, choose to look someone in the eye. And I say to listen to them, not just with our ears, but with our heart. And when we offer ourselves to someone, and you can kind of have that exchange of persons, that's the place where healing happens. That's the place where whatever's broken in us has the chance to get reworked. I believe that God is most often working through other people. And I wish, not just with our brothers and sisters on the streets, but that we could be encouraged with the sacred lives that we're living, that we could understand that everything we do matters. And so if you're a mom who has little kids and your life is spent diapering your babies and waking up in the middle of the night with them, just to understand that that is incredible love that you're showing them and you're giving yourself to them. And if you're in an office and you're trying to, make money and all that you can still practice this. You can choose to check on your colleague and leave your phone in your office and give a 10 whole minutes to listen to them or hear how their lives are going, that we can kind of lower the bar, but that people are longing for someone to see them, someone to listen to them, and that I think it's the most holy and important thing we can offer someone is ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And I read a book recently that really speaks to this, and I'm a reader. I know you're a reader, and one of the things I shared in our inaugural episode about the podcast is wanting to like dispel this myth that because somebody is a leader, and especially if you sit kind of at the top of an org chart, that means that you've got a bunch of stuff figured out. And encourage, younger leaders or people aspiring into leadership in some way to just like be honest that we are all on a journey of doing the best we can, and how we show up every day is a really small thing. But to just kind of echo what you said, like I read recently, I think it was part of this book that said, as a leader, our standards create a climate, but our actions create the weather. And I thought that was a really, really cool way to kind of to think about as an organization, right? We can set standards like this is how we behave, this is what we do, this is what we expect. But when you're a leader, you're in a unique position that the way that you show up on any given day impacts how people feel about the day, respond to their work in this case. Even I can imagine with friends on the street, you can show up with a posture of compassion and generosity, or you can show up with a posture of like annoyance and you're frustrated about something else and you're not giving of yourself in a genuine way. So talk about that a little bit, that as a leader, when you've got a million things pulling at you and you are a mom of young kids, so you're in a stage of life that I well remember, and you're probably getting phone calls during the day too about something happening with the kid at school or other things going on at home. But how do you give yourself compassionately, generously, and fully, even on days when maybe that feels hard?
I mean, I love what you said, I think, about just showing up honestly. And we've really created a culture where people are able to be themselves. And my leadership team that I work with, they know me pretty well.
Yeah.
So even if I show up acting like everything's okay, if something's going on, someone's going to notice and probably pull me aside and say, like, what's happening? And I really appreciate the safety created in our system to actually be vulnerable myself and not have it all together. And something that you said that I think is so important, we're so afraid of failure. But I think failure is the only way forward. And I wish we could shift our mentality of failure, like that we would be willing to risk, that we would be willing to fail. The only negative that can come from failure is not learning from whatever has happened. And so I failed 3,000 times. I have in moving through the human impact. Like, the primary thing that happened was that I felt like I was failing. Like, no one I was loving got off of the streets. And the people I first started to lead, I did a terrible job leading them. Like, I just had no idea what I was doing. And at the same time, I really believe God invited me to walk with him through the journey, which meant that I chose not to leave. And as I have chosen to befriend failure, it's enabled me to take the lessons and do something different moving forward. And sometimes it was doing something that I thought would help our friends, and then them looking me in the eye and say, like, that's not helpful to me. And that's a humbling thing. It's like, our whole mission is here to support you. And I've actually put a lot of time and energy into moving this program forward or this idea forward. And you're sitting across the table from me telling me it doesn't actually serve you well. I have a choice to make right now. Am I going to press forward with my agenda because I'm the leader and I can? Or am I going to take enough time to fully listen to your feedback that you're giving me? And am I willing to pivot? And so, yeah, I just think being willing to risk, being willing to fail, and to befriend your failures so that you can learn from them and carry something new forward. And the thing is, like, I'm still failing. Like, It's not like you arrive and you're like, as long as we keep risking and putting ourselves out there, we're going to come up against things we've never done before, seen before, and we're going to have to dust ourselves off, pick ourselves up, and keep walking forward.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I love that. So thinking about the uniqueness of being a founder, and not only are you a founder, but you're a female and you're young.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, compared to me, everybody feels young most of the time. But I mean, how brave it was for you to say, I'm going to found an organization. I'm going to start this thing. I mean, our organization was founded by my husband and myself. And, we had different roles, different things we did. And there's a lot you got to figure out besides just doing the work, right? I mean, there's legal and there's tax and there's insurance and all kinds of things that have to be in place to be a legitimate business. And some of that you just figure it out as you go. But not only were you young at the time and female, I know when you started the Human Impact, did you have any kids?
No children yet.
Okay. But were you married?
I was married.
Okay.
Yes.
What did your husband think about it?
Oh, yeah. Everyone thought I was crazy. Yeah. And also they thought it was a fad that would pass.
Oh, okay.
And
like a little pet project you had going on.
I had a lot of business ideas. I was really searching for my way.
Gotcha.
Started a side event company. Then I started going down to the streets and people were like, sure, this is not going to last. And people were scared for my safety because of the stereotypes that the homeless are unsafe. And yeah, it was a tough road to, I guess, align the people that were most important in my life to what I felt like God was inviting me into. And it took a lot of time and conversation and negotiation to get to that point of peace and people understanding, like, I was going to keep doing this because I really believed it was God inviting me on the journey.
Yeah. So as the founder today, how many are on your team today, staff?
We have 16 staff.
Okay. That's amazing.
It's crazy.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Because when we met you guys, I don't know, like maybe 4. Yeah, that's amazing. So I'd love to know your perspective.
Work with mission advancement in your quadruple. Just wanted to say.
All right, let's not make any promises. Yeah.
I'm making the promise.
Yeah,
so
okay. It depends on how big you are. When you're a team of 4, it's easier to quadruple than when you're a team of like 100.
Also,
right?
listen to them. If they tell you can't quadruple, listen to them.
Thank you. That's a good note. So talk about the uniqueness of being a founder. And this is something you and I think, will have fun with, because when you're the leader of the organization, you lead a team, you lead people, but you also have this history of why you started it, how you started it, what it looked like back then versus what it looks like today. There's some unique, I think, opportunities within that, right? The history that you have and the understanding of why we're here in the mission, but also hanging on to things maybe that you need to let go of. So what does that look like for you, kind of navigating that tension?
Goodness. I mean, we could talk about this for days and days and days. And if my leadership team were here right now, they also would have lots of stories on me about this. I think that having my kids while I was building the ministry, well, it's the hardest thing I've ever done, 1. But 2, I think it also is one of the greatest gifts that God gave me, that would be the timing. Because especially when I had our 3rd child in 2021, I had someone working with me named Brad Ward who had come on about 9 months before. And he took over while I was on maternity leave. And he is very different in the way he thinks and approaches things than I am. And so he really dug into kind of all the historical documents of the company and why I did the things. I think I had written some stuff that he read, and he used, though, his very strategic financial brain to think about. He actually worked with Lacey on developing our first strategic plan.
Okay.
And so I have been partly forced to hand things over because of my age and stage and because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just to be honest.
Yeah.
And that has been hard. And it has also been the most incredible gift, because it's taught me that if I can trust other people who actually are incredibly talented, and in many ways way more talented than I am in certain ways, that I get to move forward in what really is my highest and best use to the company as we grow. And to build something, you've had to wear literally every single hat.
Right.
And sometimes that need for control can slip in. And then when I've released certain things to people, they don't always do it the right way.
Right. Because your way's the right way. Right. Of course. Yeah.
And then we've had to negotiate okay, Elisabeth, when is it worth letting that thing go? And when do you need to speak up and say, you're missing this key element? This is important because I want to give you one example.
Okay.
We have events where we bring our whole community together. Some are feet washing events, some are worship nights, some are these meals called Come to the Table, where we all eat together. And I, from the beginning, have not wanted people to stand in line. The reason is because what I observed for so many years is that the homeless are always having to stand in line. And there's something really strange about being an adult and for everything you need, having to stand in line to get it. It's not the way most of us do our day-to-day lives all the time. And it makes them feel, my perception is that they feel different. So if you're homeless, you're standing in line and the rest of us are here. So if we're all standing in line together to get our name tags, that doesn't bother me. But when it's just you waiting in line, that really irks me.
Okay.
So I showed up at an event that I had let someone else plan, and people were standing in line. And I was like, no, don't let them stand in line. And it was a moment for me of oh, wow, I'm really upset about this. It's not worth saying something in this moment. The event needs to go on. They've given their best effort, but I need to think about how to communicate this to the team, why this is important, and how this really needs to be part of what we do going forward, is not having people stand in line unless it's all of us doing the same thing. So then that was actually a conversation with Brad. And Brad has really helped me because he's been around the longest. He's really helped me discern, he lets me vent, and he helps me discern what's the thing that I just need to release control and trust that actually the other people doing it are better equipped to do it than I am. And where is there something that I didn't even know was a really core part of who we are. And actually it came a lot through observation or listening to people. that I didn't think to communicate because I was doing everything before. And when do I speak up about those things and make sure, and then how do I not just speak up about it once, but how do we make sure it gets translated where everyone knows when we have a new events person, where they know we don't want people standing in line unless it's everybody standing in line.
That's a neat story. Yeah, because the why behind that is, super purposeful, right? And obviously very mission driven from the heart. And it seems very simple, but that's a great example because I heard recently, again, another leader, teacher, somebody that said, you got to be careful that your preferences don't overshadow purpose. And I thought that was really interesting because it's easy as a founder, especially when you've been there since the beginning, to think, well, we've always done it that way, or that's the way I did it. And now they're doing it differently, or someone wants to do it differently. And to check yourself on, is that a personal preference or is that really a purpose? And like your example was a purpose. There was a really meaningful reason behind that, where in a lot of cases, maybe it is a preference. And sometimes you just got to be okay with it. Even if you're like, well, I like my way better. This isn't a battle that's worth fighting. So that's a great example. Okay, we're going to start to kind of wind it down, even though we could go on for hours. But one of our questions that we ask all of our guests is, in the spirit of, leaders being transparent, authentic, vulnerable, in recognizing that we don't have all the answers just because we sit in a seat where we're expected to make a lot of decisions. But what is a recent challenge or tension that you've had as a leader that has required some courage from you?
I have been invited by the nature of the stage of our work and where we're headed. So I've been invited to get out and speak more. And that has required courage, both personally to develop my voice and be able to communicate to different groups who we are and what I'm asking of them. And a lot of times I just want them to change their minds about the homeless and be willing to have a conversation with someone on the side of the road. But sometimes I'm asking people to contribute financially and help us, achieve our mission. And so I've been slowly growing in this, but the last 4 or 5 months have really called me to kind of step out more. And that's taken a lot of courage. And it also has meant that I've needed to make sure my leadership team is equipped to handle the things that I can't handle when I'm out and about doing all the fundraising, speaking, vision casting. And part of the reason why we're in this season of growth is that we have not only our core mission, which is going to the streets, building friendships, accompanying people on their road to healing, but also someone purchased land for us about 1.5 years ago, and we're in a capital campaign to build something called the Abbey.
Yes.
Which will be a small community for our friends, for people who are going to live there missionally, and then community space to serve a lot more people. And we're also in post-production on a documentary.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
And we have a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal to change the national conversation on homelessness, to include not just the economic support that I began this time talking about, but the relational support. And that you can't socially isolate a whole group of people in society and expect to change an issue. That it really is our problem, society's problem, and that we need to break down our fears and stereotypes. We need to confront them with truth, which I got lots more on that, and have the courage to not walk past people. There's a statistic out of Atlanta that says that our friends on the streets, they go 3 months without having someone look them in the eye.
Wow.
And 6 months without hearing their name. So whatever traumas they've brought to the streets, there's the daily added trauma of literally becoming invisible. And we believe people must be seen, and they have to be known, and they need to be believed in. And so we are inviting people to have courage and to befriend the person they pass on the streets instead of looking away. And we're trying to equip people with how to do that. So when we release the documentary, we'll also have a playbook so that people around the country can pick this up wherever they are.
Wow. That's incredible. So I know people are going to be saying, how do I know more? How do I learn more? Where do I go see this documentary? How do I find you? give them a little bit of guidance as to how they can learn more about human impact or see some of these things you guys are working on.
Our website is thehumanimpact.org. We have, all the socials. So we're just at The Human Impact. I also am sharing some messaging ahead of the release of the documentary. You can follow me too at Elisabeth Jordan. It's Elisabeth with an S. Get excited.
Yes.
So I think following along, and if you're local to Dallas, coming out with us, and I would say try to come out a couple of times. What we're really trying to impart to people are principles, which means you may not be called to walk with the human impact, but you're called to walk with people. You're called to see people who are forgotten in your own neighborhood. And so come with us and learn a little bit about how we see and how we treat others. And then know that you're going to take something away to maybe knock on the door of your elderly neighbor and spend 30 minutes listening to how they're doing. That you are going to be enriched to build relationships in your own community. I say we all want kids who see the lonely kid who has no one sitting with them at lunch and invite them over. Well, they really need to see the adults in their lives living out that radical generosity of spirit and willingness to encounter people who are different from them. And if we're not modeling it, it doesn't really matter what we're saying to them. We actually have to be living it out. So I want to invite everyone to have the courage to begin to cross lines that normally divide us and say hello to someone that you wouldn't normally say hello to, and maybe leave 10 minutes to listen to their story.
Wow. Radical generosity. That was good. I like that. I would love to talk for 3 more hours, but you are such an inspiration. As I listen to you, I'm like, I think we're going to see this woman on the national stage. I know you kind of already are leaning in that direction, but when I think of people who know this space and are passionate about it and have a voice that is authentic and unique and so kind, I'm going to be so excited to be like, she was on our podcast one time, Elisabeth Jordan, the, cabinet member or something in the future. So thank you for inspiring people. Thank you for joining Mission Advancement. You've been so kind. We're so gracious or so grateful for your partnership, and just your giving of your time today is a real act of generosity that we're grateful for. So I encourage people to find the human impact, learn more, think about the principles that they teach in their own lives, and let generosity show up in a really unique and special way. So thank you for being here. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to the Mission Advancement Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you'll be notified of future episodes. You can also find out more info at missionadvancement.com or on social channels. Thanks again for listening.